In the past day, London was once again the site of a terror attack. Shortly after midnight, a van rammed into a group of pedestrians near the Finsbury Park mosque in North London. One person died at the scene and at least 10 were wounded, but the authorities said it was not immediately clear if the death was caused by the attack. And from what I've read, these people had left the midnight prayer at this mosque, had walked very close to the mosque, and had found an elderly man who had collapsed for some health-related reason, and were aiding him when they were hit by this monster with his van. So even worse, and one did end up dying. The driver of the van was this 47-year-old white man, wrestled to the ground by police at the scene and held until by people at the scene and held until police arrived. He's being held currently on terrorism offenses, and I've read that the imam at that mosque stopped an angry crowd from turning on the van driver, telling the mob do not touch him, which I'm sure they didn't appreciate at the time, but of course is the right thing to do in that case. 2 people were treated at the scene and 9 others were taken to 3 hospitals. 2 of them are seriously injured. And there was initially, and this is just one small aspect, obviously the tragedies, the death and the injuries, but in the initial reports that another van had rammed into someone, and in fact, in the past day, someone also rammed their car into a police officer's vehicle on the Champs-Élysées. Again, thankfully only that driver was killed. There was some initial interest in this attack, and very quickly, people moved on and didn't really care too much. I noticed that on Fox News and Breitbart, hey, the terror central websites, they don't care anymore. I didn't see anything from Donald Trump about this, despite the fact that they were interested the last time there was a terror attack. Now granted, that was days ago because we live in a horrible world. It was all the way days ago. But once it turned out that this guy had targeted Muslims rather than being a Muslim, suddenly there was a little bit less interest.
Yeah, that's surprising to just about nobody. And I think this imam should set the example for everybody. This guy, there were people trying to kick and punch this driver, who turns out is a Welsh father of 4. Who's
alleged to have shouted he wants to kill all Muslims at the scene. We never know for sure.
And when he was in the van afterwards, he was blowing kisses to people. He was, and he, some of the early reports that I saw, usually after these, you say, I can't believe it was John. I can't believe he did this. He was always a quiet. Everybody said
some other name.
People said I could have used Mark, but he said the people I saw talking about him are saying, yeah, it sounds like him. It's not surprising. That's just a couple of people, it's anecdotes. But really underscoring all of this is the story of this imam, who is just like most people within his religion, saying, get away, stop being brutal to this guy. We'll arrest him, protected this guy. And that's gonna be his last memory of a night that will change his life. I'm talking about the killer. And forever, is that this imam protected and saved his life, perhaps, right there.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed as though everything right in that story was associated with that imam. And honestly, with a cool-headed mayor of London, I think that it's a real example as we sort of look at our leadership and see everything politicized and divided. He's having to ride herd over a city that is not only bringing together a lot of different ethnicities, but is now really the focus of terrorism. And it's a lot of one-off terrorism. It's a lot of copycat terrorism, inspired terrorism, all this sort of thing. So his job is a tough one. And I think it's no small footnote that he himself is Muslim to, perhaps be the right guy at this time for that city.
And in the city, he's under a lot of, I would say, scrutiny too, because of the fire that just happened there. Separate from these shootings, it's a terrible time to be mayor of London, but maybe, as you said, maybe a good time to have a Muslim mayor of London. But the fire is also an entirely different thing that he's taking a lot of heat for.
Exactly, thankfully so far in the wake of this terror attack, Donald Trump has not attacked him on Twitter, but we will see. Now, we also had some responses. Theresa May, Prime Minister of the UK, said this was an attack on Muslims near their place of worship, and like all terrorism in whatever form, it shares the same fundamental goal. It seeks to drive us apart and to break the precious bonds of solidarity and citizenship which we share in this country. And that sort of sentiment was echoed by the deputy director of the International Center for the Study of Radicalization, that said, ISIS has long held the idea of wanting to provoke the West, not just by provoking governments, but also by creating pressure on society so that people are driven toward the extremes. And that's the thing, they're not just looking to get people who are fans of them to attack people. They want their own people. They want Muslims in the West to feel like they have no place in society. They want them to feel like the only place they can turn is to some sort of radicalization. And it doesn't hurt their mission when people on the other side feel like, well, they killed some of ours, we're gonna kill some of them, which is apparently what we're seeing in this particular case. John Oliver had a great response to, I believe it was to the Manchester bombing, where he talked about it might not have been, it might have been the stabbing actually, the resiliency of the British people in the face of all this and how life goes on and everything, and I'm sure that it does. But this has been a rough set of weeks for those in the UK, especially those in the area of London, where it feels like you can't go a couple of days without something like this.
Yeah, they were talking about Queen Elizabeth, who with her grandson and one of her sons at a different time, I think, is visiting some of the victims from Manchester to the Grenfell Tower fire to the stabbing, and how people haven't felt this way, or older Britons haven't felt this way since the war, when the monarch would go from place to place during the war. At that time it was George and I think it's or Edward, but it's amazing when you think about that. When you think about the fact that there's somebody, that things are happening almost on a weekly basis.
Yeah, there's a sense of maybe almost a siege-like mentality there.
Yeah.
And terrorism is one of those things. I mean, just almost by definition, that keeps the public on edge. And I think John correctly identifies the fact that they want that anxiety. They want the Muslim community to feel as though you're going to have to hang together. Assimilating with this heterogeneous community of London is not what we want.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is so special about London, though. I think they really do have sort of an integrated community. People feel very comfortable historically with different faiths and sort of the cross-pollination of these religions.
Yeah.
I think it's, in a sense, London's going to be a tough nut to crack if they're really trying to divide these communities.
Yeah, and it's easy to see in this short span of time these incidents, which are tragic individually and certainly in aggregate, and think that, oh, they must be making headway there, but it's incredibly likely that they're not. I mean, as you said, this is not some new thing where you have diversity in London. That's the historic state of London. And I think that I agree. I think that they're going to have a very hard time advancing their mission in the particular way that they want.
Membership helps fund the Young Turks. You know one great thing about that? That means we're not accountable to anyone but you guys. That's why we're strong together, because we built this show around you. Come build it even bigger and better at tytnetwork.com/join.